The first 3 nights, Denny just said it like he was reminding me to lock the back door. If 7 rings after 3, you don't pick it up. I thought it was hazing. Every job has one. The new guy sent to find the left-handed screwdriver, the tap that only runs hot if you kick it. I figured line 7 was ours. On the 4th night it rang. It was 3:14 by the clock on my console. Not a normal ring either. Every other line in the center chirps, a soft electronic double tone. But 7 had this old mechanical buzz, like a phone from my grandmother's kitchen wired into the wrong decade. I had my hand halfway to it before I even thought about it. Pure reflex after 11 hours. And Denny was up out of his chair faster than I'd ever seen him move. He didn't grab me. He just put his hand flat over the top of the phone, over the whole cradle, and held it there while it buzzed underneath his palm. He wasn't looking at the phone. He was looking at me. "Not that one," he said. Quiet, almost gentle. It rang 11 more times. I counted. Then it stopped, and the room went back to the hum of the HVAC, and the scanner static, and Marisol 2 consoles down, taking a domestic in progress, out on Route 9. Denny took his hand off the phone, sat back down, and picked his coffee up like nothing had happened. His hand wasn't quite steady. I noticed that, and filed it under a lot of coffee, and not enough sleep, which is what I filed most things under back then. Before we continue, if this story has you listening a little closer, consider subscribing to Midnight Files. Your support is what keeps these stories coming, and if you're already subscribed, thank you. Now, let's get back to what happened. I should back up and explain how I got there, because if you'd told me a year before that I'd sit and watch a grown man guard a telephone with his bare hand at 3 in the morning, I'd have told you to lay off the energy drinks. I was the skeptic. That was the whole thing about me. That was my personality at work. My name's Aaron Keel. At the time this started, I was 36, and I'd been a dispatcher for a little over 6 years, the last 2 of them in Holworth County. If you don't know it, and you don't, nobody does. Holworth's up in the northeast corner of Ohio, the part that stops looking like Ohio and starts looking like the beginning of Pennsylvania. Hills, bad radio, a lot of 2-lane county roads with names instead of numbers, roads that go back to farms that stopped being farms in the 70s. The county seat is a town called Ammon, about 4,000 people, a courthouse, a marathon station, a Dollar General that everybody still calls the new one, even though it went up in 2009. Our comm center sits in the basement level of the sheriff's office on Chapel Street, and it covers the whole county. Sheriff's road units, 4 volunteer fire departments, 1 EMS service running 2 medics on a good night and 1 on a bad one. I got into dispatch the way half of us do, which is by accident and then by not leaving. I'd done a couple years of community college for criminal justice, thinking I wanted to be a cop. Figured out I didn't have the temperament for the road, and a woman at the college job fair told me dispatch paid okay and didn't require getting shot at. That was the whole recruiting pitch. I took a job downstate first, in a bigger center outside Columbus, and I was good at it. I've got the thing you need for it, which is a kind of flat effect under pressure. When somebody's screaming that their husband isn't breathing, my heart rate doesn't move. It used to bother my ex-wife, actually. She said I sounded like a recording even when it was just the 2 of us. She wasn't wrong. The divorce is why I ended up in Holworth, more or less. After it went through, I wanted small and quiet and cheap, and Holworth is all 3. I took nights on purpose. Nights are slower, the pay differential is real, and, this is the part nobody says out loud, you don't have to talk to as many people. Day shift is car accidents and lockouts and old ladies who can't find their cat. Nights are long stretches of nothing, punctuated by things you don't forget. I liked the nothing. I told myself I liked the nothing. People think dispatch is exciting because of the calls where somebody's dying. Mostly it isn't. Mostly it's sitting in a cold room under lights that never turn off, watching a screen that doesn't change, waiting. You learn the shape of a shift, the way you learn the shape of a long drive. There's a stretch after the bars close, around 2:30, where the whole county seems to hold its breath. That's when the strange calls come, if they come. Not because anything strange is happening, just because that's when there's nobody left awake to make the ordinary ones. The first thing you learn on nights is that your job is 90% talking to people who are having the worst moment of their lives, and your entire value is that you're the one person in the conversation who isn't. You're the flat voice. You're the one who says, "Okay, stay with me. Tell me what you see." There's a specific thing that happens to a dispatcher over the years, and I didn't have a word for it until much later. You get trained, all the way down in the reflexes, to answer a voice in the dark. Somebody speaks out of nowhere, out of the worst night of their life, and before you've even finished thinking, you're already saying it. "I hear you. I'm here. Tell me where you are." That's the whole job. That's the thing you can't turn off. Remember that I told you this. Our center wasn't big. On overnights, it was usually 2 of us on the floor, sometimes 3 on a weekend. Denny Rausch was the senior man, had been there since before the county went to the current CAD system, maybe 25 years. Denny was the kind of guy who'd worked one job his whole life and had opinions about the coffee that were basically theological. Big soft man, reading glasses on a cord, a Vietnam-era dad energy, even though he was too young for Vietnam. He trained everybody. He'd trained Marisol. He'd trained the day people. He trained me even though I came in with experience, because Halworth did things Halworth's way, and he wanted me to know it. What I respected about Denny wasn't the years. Plenty of people get old in a job without getting good at it. What I respected was the way he listened. I'd catch him on a call, some rambling old man reporting a light in a field, and Denny would let him ramble, and somewhere in the ramble he'd hear the one detail: the man's chest hurt, or he'd fallen and couldn't get up, and the light in the field was on his own porch that he couldn't remember turning on. Denny heard the thing, under the thing. I told him once he was wasted in a county this small, and he looked at me like I'd insulted him. "Small county's the only place it matters," he said. "In a big city you're a number. Out here I know these people. I dispatched the ambulance that got born half of them, and I'll dispatch the one that hauls off the other half." He wasn't being sentimental. He was just stating the arrangement he'd made with his life. Marisol Vega was the other regular on nights, mid-40s, sharp, funny in a dry way that took me a while to catch. She'd grown up in the county, knew every road by feel, could hear a caller stumbling over a landmark and tell you exactly where they were before the GPS caught up. Callers loved her, and she didn't love them back, and it worked out fine. Our supervisor was a woman named Paula Denk, who worked days and existed to us mostly as emails and the occasional note taped to a monitor. Sergeant on nights was usually a deputy named Cole Brandt, who I'll get to, because Cole matters. So that's the world. Fluorescent tubes, one of them always about to go. That specific basement smell of old carpet and warm electronics. 2 big CAD monitors per console, a bank of phone lines, the radio, and a window unit that made the whole room 40 degrees colder than the hallway because the servers ran hot. We kept jackets on our chairs in July. Denny had a little space heater under his desk he wasn't supposed to have, and a photo of a boat he was always going to buy, taped to the side of his monitor. For the first 3 weeks, nothing happened that I'd call strange. I want to be clear about that, because later I went back through it in my head looking for the first crack, and I couldn't find one. It was just the job. Let me give you a few, so you understand what normal looked like, because normal is the whole point. My second week, a little after 1, I took a stranded motorist out on the state route. Young guy, out of gas, no idea where he was. The way people are now that the phone does the knowing for them. I kept him talking, got him to read me the little green mile marker sign in his headlights, and Marisol, without even looking up from her own call, wrote a road name on a sticky note and slid it onto my desk. She was right, of course. I sent a deputy with a can of gas, and the kid was so grateful he cried a little, which happens more than you'd think at that hour. That's a good call. That's the kind you want. Nobody hurt, everybody home. Another night, a medical. An old woman named Dorothy whose husband had gone down in the bathroom, and I walked her through CPR on a man who was almost certainly already gone, counting for her, 30 and 2, 30 and 2, her doing it in her nightgown on a cold tile floor, while the medic was still 11 minutes out. He didn't make it. She thanked me anyway. That's the part nobody warns you about. The ones who thank you. Denny came over after that one, put a hand on my shoulder, didn't say anything, went and refilled my coffee. That was Denny's whole vocabulary of comfort, and it was enough. And there was Earl, our regular, who called every night around midnight to report that people were in his walls, off his meds, harmless, and we'd send a deputy to knock and tell him nobody was in the walls, and he'd go to bed satisfied. Denny always took Earl himself if he was on. He knew Earl's whole story, the wife who died, the son who didn't call. He'd stay on the line with him 10-15 minutes, longer than the call needed, just talking about the Browns. The people in the walls are the least of Earl's problems, Denny told me once. He just wants somebody to answer. I laughed. I didn't know yet that the sentence would come back to me. That was the world. A normal job in a quiet county, staffed by people who'd made their peace with the dark part of the night. The line 7 thing, I filed under folklore. Denny's warning stuck with me only because of how he'd said it. No wink, no smile. But a lot of old-timers say things like that with a straight face, because the joke's funnier if you commit. I asked Marisol about it my second week, casual, refilling my water bottle at the cooler. Denny say something to you? She said, about line 7, not to answer it after 3. She capped her own bottle and thought about how to answer, which I noticed, because Marisol didn't usually think about how to answer things. She answered everything fast. That was her whole style. It's an old line, she said finally, tied to a number that used to route to a call box out on the state route, back before cell phones. Highway Department decommissioned the box years ago, but the line's still live in our system. Sometimes it does weird stuff. Denny doesn't like it. Just let it ring. Weird stuff how? Just let it ring, Aaron. And she walked back to her console, and I noticed she didn't drink from the bottle she'd just filled. She set it down on her desk, and it sat there sweating all night, untouched. That was a good explanation, the call box. That's the thing about it. It was a genuinely good explanation, the kind you'd accept and never think about again. An orphaned analog line, a dead call box, occasional phantom rings from a copper pair that had corroded somewhere out in the weeds. I'd heard of stuff like that. I nodded and drank my water and went back to work and didn't think about line 7 again until it rang and Denny put his hand over it. After it stopped, that 4th night, I let it sit for maybe an hour before I said anything. Then, during a lull, I turned my chair toward him. So the call box, I said. The corroded line. It just rings sometimes. Denny didn't look up from whatever he was reading. Something like that. Marisol said it's a dead line from the Highway Department. She's not wrong, but you covered the phone with your hand. Now he looked up. He took his glasses off, which he did when he wanted you to know he was being serious, and he rubbed the bridge of his nose. You want the real answer, or you want to keep the one that lets you sleep? I'll be honest, I laughed. Not at him. It just came out, because it was such a horror movie line coming out of a guy who'd spent the last 20 minutes complaining that the second shift kept moving his stapler. Denny didn't laugh with me. He put his glasses back on. Answer it once, he said. You'll stop asking me questions and start asking yourself. I've watched 3 people do it. I don't want to watch a 4th. Then he turned back to his reading, and that was the whole conversation. I want you to notice, he never actually told me anything. He never said a word about what was on the line. He just told me not to find out, and let me fill in the blank myself, which of course made it worse. I decided he was messing with me. I'm telling you my actual reasoning at the time, because it matters that I wasn't stupid. I decided that Denny, over 25 years, had built up a superstition around a glitchy line. Dispatchers are superstitious. We're worse than baseball players. And that a bad call or two on that number long ago had gotten mixed up in his head with the ringing, and now the ringing itself gave him the creeps, and he'd turned it into a rule to explain the feeling. That's a completely ordinary human thing. I've got my own version of it. There's an intersection downstate I still won't drive through if I can help it, because I dispatched a fatal there, and it lives in my body. It doesn't mean the intersection is haunted. It means I am. So I let it go. And for about 10 days, nothing. Then came the Handle Road call, and that's really where this starts. It was a Tuesday, or technically a Wednesday, a little after 2 a.m. Slow night, drizzling, the kind of fine cold rain that sits on the hills. I took a 911 on the regular line. Line 2, an ordinary line. I want to be clear about that. This had nothing to do with 7. Female caller, older, calm but tight. The way people get when they're scared but trying to do it right. 911, what's the address of your emergency? I need somebody to come out. There's a man in the yard and he won't leave and I've asked him to. Okay, what's the address where you need us? 1440 Handel Road. I typed it in. CAD wants a verified address, and it'll auto-complete off the county's mapping data as you type. And I got 1440 Handel Road. No problem. It populated clean. Dropped a pin. Handel Road's a real road out in the western part of the county, up past the reservoir. So far, ordinary. Okay, ma'am, I've got 1440 Handel. Is the man someone you know? No. He's just standing at the edge of the yard by the tree line. He's been there since the porch light came on. Her voice caught. He's not moving right. What do you mean he's not moving right? He's kind of leaning. Like he's about to fall, but he doesn't fall. He's just leaning there looking at the house. I've taken 1,000 prowler calls. 95% of them are a raccoon, a drunk neighbor, or a shadow. But you treat everyone like it's real, because the one time you don't is the one that isn't. I toned out Cole Brandt. Deputy Brandt was the only county unit rolling that night, and gave him the address and the nature. He acknowledged, said he was probably 15 out from that side of the county, which up there is normal. 15 minutes to anywhere. I kept the caller on the line. Her name was Ruth. I got her a little more grounded, got her to lock the doors, stay away from the windows, keep talking to me. She said the man hadn't tried to come closer. He was just at the tree line, leaning. Is anybody else in the house with you, Ruth? Just me. My husband's asleep. A pause. No, he isn't. I forgot for a second. She said it the way you'd correct yourself about the day of the week. And then she said, do you hear that? Hear what, Ruth? He's talking now. He's saying something. A pause. He's saying my husband's name. Is your husband home? Long silence on the line. Long enough that I said her name twice. My husband passed in the spring, she said. In April. It'll be a year in April. And then, softer, like she was ashamed of it. I keep forgetting. I'm sorry. It's late. Now that's a thing that happens. Grief does strange things, and 2 a.m. does strange things. And a stranger in the yard becomes, in a frightened widow's head, something to do with the person she's lost. I stayed calm. I kept her talking. I told her the deputy was close. And he was close. And this is the part I keep coming back to. Cole radioed that he was on Handel Road. Then he radioed that he was at the 1400 block. Then there was a pause. The kind where you can picture a man sitting in his running cruiser, with the wipers going, looking at something. Com 41. Cole's voice, flat. 41, go ahead. You want to check that address again. 1440 Handel. There's no house here. There's a foundation. It's a burned-out foundation. Been that way for years. There's no structure standing at this location. I looked at my screen. The pin was right where the address said. The caller, Ruth, was still on my other line, breathing. 41. I've got the caller on the line right now. She's inside the residence. Another pause. Com. I'm standing in the driveway. There's grass growing up through the floor slab. Nobody's lived here in, I don't know, a long time. You sure you've got the address right? I muted the deputy and came back to Ruth, and I asked her, very calmly, to describe her house to me. What color was it? What did she see out the front window? She said it was white with green shutters. She said out the front window she could see the deputy's headlights coming up the drive. He's here, she said, and I heard relief flood into her voice. And I heard, faintly, under her voice, the sound of a car engine idling and windshield wipers going, thock, 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 in perfect time, with the ones I could hear through Cole's open radio. I want to stop on that, because it's the first thing I couldn't explain away later, and it's still the worst. 2 audio sources. One was a phone in a house that didn't exist. One was a radio in a running cruiser parked at a foundation, and the wipers on both were moving in exactly the same rhythm, at exactly the same time, which is only possible if they were the same wipers, if Ruth and Cole were, somehow, in the same place. I told Cole to get out and walk the property, and I want you to understand I did this fully expecting there was a simple answer, that Ruth lived at 1440, and Cole had fat-fingered his own GPS, or was looking at the wrong lot in the dark. He got out. I heard his door. I heard his boots in gravel, and I heard Ruth say, "He's walking up. He's coming to the porch." Cole didn't report a porch. He reported the foundation, a chimney standing by itself, and a metal mailbox knocked off its post lying in the weeds. He read me the number stenciled on the mailbox. 4040. "Ruth," I said, "the deputy's right out front. I want you to open the door for him. Can you do that for me?" "I'm at the door," she said. "I've got my hand on it." And then, in a different voice, a smaller voice, a voice that had figured something out a half-second before I did. "There's nobody out here. The headlights are gone. It's just the yard and the man." A pause. "He's not leaning anymore. He's standing up straight now. He's looking right at me." Then Ruth's line went dead. Not hung up. Dead. That specific drop to dial tone, that isn't quite dial tone dead. I tried to call back the number. It didn't ring. It gave me the 3 tones. And the recording, "The number you have dialed, is not in service." Cole cleared the call as unfounded, standard, prowler, gone on arrival, no structure, likely a wrong address or a prank. He was more rattled than his radio voice let on. I could tell, because when he came into the center at end of shift to do his paperwork, he asked me directly, off to the side, "That caller, she really said she was inside a house?" I said yes. He nodded slowly. Then he said, "When I was standing on that slab, I heard a screen door, off in the tree line. There's no door out there. There's nothing out there but trees." He said it like he was daring me to make something of it. I didn't. He nodded again and went to write his report, and he wrote it as unfounded, because there's no box on the form for what actually happened. Here's where I did what I do, which is not believe in anything. I pulled the call. Every 911 call gets recorded, time-stamped, tied to the CAD incident. I found the incident. I found Ruth's call on line 2, and I played it back at the end of shift with my own headset on. It was there. Ruth's voice, the whole thing, the man at the tree line, her husband's name, her house with green shutters, and Cole's radio traffic, the foundation, the mailbox. All of it captured, all of it real, 2 people describing 2 completely different places, at the same GPS coordinates, at the same time, the wipers in sync. All of it, on the recording, exactly as it happened. And I found the explanation, and it was a good one, and I held on to it for 2 more weeks. The explanation was this: 1440 Handle Road had, in fact, burned down. I found that easy enough the next night, poking through old incident records during a dead stretch. There was a structure fire at that address. I had to go back into the archived CAD, the pre-migration stuff we keep on a separate drive, but I found it. House fire, 1440 Handle Road, total loss, and a woman named Ruth Kessler, 61, and her husband, Daniel Kessler, 64, both listed, both deceased. Smoke inhalation. The fire was in 1994, so I built the rational version, and here it is, because I really did believe it. Somebody in the county knew about the Kessler fire. Some local, maybe a relative, maybe a bored teenager who'd heard the story, was prank calling us with a period-accurate hoax. The old house, the green shutters, the dead husband's name. Cruel, but people are cruel, and small towns keep their tragedies well. The number came back as not in service because it was spoofed. The wipers thing was a coincidence, or my tired ears making a pattern. The whole thing was a performance. It was, honestly, an impressive one, and part of me was a little bit angry, and a little bit almost admiring, the way you get about a really committed jerk. I decided to nail it down properly, because a prank leaves a trail and I wanted the trail. That's how I ended up spending 2 nights of dead time turning the Kessler fire over, and every single thing I found made the prank theory better, right up until the moment it fell apart. The fire report was in a grey folder in the records room upstairs, the paper ones from before everything went digital. Ammon Volunteer Fire, engine and a tanker, 1994. Cause listed as electrical, kitchen, standard for an old rural house. 2 fatalities, found together in the front room near the door, which the fire investigator noted was unusual. People usually die trying to get out, but the Kesslers were found like they'd been standing at the door waiting to open it for somebody. The investigator wrote that in the dry way those men write everything, and moved on. I didn't move on. I read that sentence 4 times, standing at the door. The property records were downstairs in the auditor's office, and I called down during day shift and had a clerk pull them, told her it was for an old incident review, which was almost true. The Kesslers had owned one 1440 handle since 1961. After the fire, the lot went to the county for back taxes and never sold. Nobody wanted a burned lot up past the reservoir. It had sat there, foundation and chimney and a mailbox, for 30 years. That fit the prank theory fine. A famous local ruin. Everybody would know it. Then I went looking for the newspaper, because a fire with 2 dead makes the paper in a county this size. The Ammon paper folded in 2011, but the library in the courthouse basement has the back issues on microfilm, and I have a friendly relationship with the courthouse, because dispatchers and clerks are all the same tribe. I spent a lunch break down there cranking through 1994 on a machine older than I was. The fire made the front page, like I figured. Kesslers, married 33 years, well liked. Daniel drove a school bus route for the county for 2 decades. There was a photo of the house before, white with green shutters. Green shutters. That checked the last box on the prank theory. Anybody with a library card could have seen that photo, could have built the whole performance off this one article. But there was a second article, 3 weeks later, that I almost cranked right past. A follow-up, a small item, bottom of page 5. The county was looking into the emergency response to the Kessler fire because there'd been a delay, and the delay, according to the reporter, was that the initial 911 call about the fire had come in and been logged, but the dispatcher on duty had marked it unfounded and hadn't rolled the fire department for almost 40 minutes. By the time a second caller, a neighbor who saw the glow, got units moving, the house was gone. I sat in that basement with the microfilm humming, and I read that 3 times too. The first call about the Kessler fire was marked unfounded. Somebody called it in, and the dispatcher decided it wasn't real, and did nothing, and 2 people died at their own front door. I wanted to know who took that first call. The article didn't name the dispatcher, but I knew where the old logs were, the paper ones, the same grey folders as the fire report, and the next night I went back up to records, and I found the dispatch log for that date. And there it was, in blue ballpoint, in a hand I didn't recognize. A call logged at 2:11 a.m., before the fire, a report of a man in the yard at 1440 Handle Road, marked unfounded, cleared, and then, 40 minutes later, the fire call, a man in the yard, at 1440 Handle, in 1994. The same call I'd taken 30 years later, the same address, the same detail, the same hour of the night. The dispatcher in 1994 had marked it unfounded, probably for the exact reasons I'd have marked it unfounded, because a prowler call from a quiet road at 2 in the morning that comes back with nothing is unfounded. That's what the word is for. And 40 minutes later, the house that the man was standing outside of caught fire and killed the 2 people inside. The prank theory died right there, on microfilm, in a courthouse basement, because a prank in 2024 cannot leave a matching entry in a paper log from 1994, written in a dead dispatcher's hand. There was no way to fake that. There was nobody to fake it for. I did not sleep that day. I lay in bed and did the thing I do, which is treat it like a call. What happened? Where? Who called? Can I verify it? And the only verification I had led one direction, and it wasn't a direction I believed in. That version, the last rational one, survived until I mentioned the name Kessler to Denny. I did it casually, again, because I was still playing it casual with myself. Slow night, I said. Hey, you ever hear of a family named Kessler? House fire out on Handel Road, back in the 90s. Denny had been eating a sandwich. He set it down. He didn't set it down dramatically. He just set it down and left it. And he looked at me the way you look at somebody who's told you their test results. When, he said. When what? When did the call come in? I told him. Tuesday, a little after 2. He asked which line. I said line 2, a regular 911. Nothing to do with his line 7 business. He shook his head slowly, not disagreeing with me exactly, more like he was disagreeing with the universe. It moves, he said, half to himself. Then, to me, it's not staying on 7 anymore. He rubbed his face with both hands. It used to stay put. That was the one mercy of it. You knew where it lived. You knew the door it knocked on. He looked at his cold sandwich. Did you play it back? Yeah. Play it again tomorrow. What do you mean, play it again? It's a recording. It doesn't change. Denny picked his sandwich back up, which I'd learned was his way of ending a conversation he didn't want to be in, and said, play it again tomorrow, Aaron. I heard 2 things in that conversation that I only understood later. One was, it moves, and it's not staying on 7 anymore, which meant that whatever Denny thought line 7 was, he thought it had gotten loose, and that scared him in a way the ringing never had. The other was the word door, which he used like it was ordinary, like of course it had a door, and which I didn't think about at all at the time, and which I would not stop thinking about for the rest of my life. That night, on my break, I played the recording again, and it was the same. Ruth, the man at the tree line, the husband's name, green shutters, the whole thing, exactly as I remembered it. I felt a little stupid, honestly, sitting in the break room proving to myself that a computer file hadn't rewritten itself. Then I noticed the timestamp on the audio file was wrong. Not the timestamp on the incident, that said Tuesday, 2:07 a.m. correct. But the audio file's own creation metadata, the thing the recording system stamps when it writes the file to disk, that said the file had been created at 3:14 a.m. Not 2:07, and on line 7. I stared at that for a while. Then I did the reasonable thing and decided it was a metadata bug. Recording systems are janky. The channel labeling gets crossed. Files get rewritten during archival. Timestamps drift. IT would have a boring answer. I even opened a ticket, low priority, audio file metadata mismatch on incident such and such. And I got back a reply 2 days later from the county IT contractor that said, and I'm quoting from memory, no error found, file integrity normal, original capture channel, L7, and a note, L7 is not a valid 911 intake channel in current config. Please confirm incident number. Line 7 wasn't even set up to record 911 calls. It couldn't have taken Ruth's call. Ruth's call came in on line 2. I answered it on line 2. Everybody agrees it was line 2. But the file said the audio was captured on 7, as if the call had come in the front door, but the recording had been made somewhere else, somewhere in the back of the building, on a line that only rings between 3 and 3:30, and that Denny won't let anybody touch. As if line 2 was just the room the sound walked through, and line 7 was where it lived. I went back to Marisol with this, because Marisol was the one who'd given me the tidy explanation about the highway department and the dead call box, and I trusted her more than I trusted Denny's superstition. I laid it all out for her at the start of a shift. The Handel Road call, the foundation, the 1994 fire, the 94 log entry, the file that said line 7. I expected her to poke holes in it. Marisol was a hole poker. That's what I wanted from her. She listened to the whole thing without interrupting, which wasn't like her, and when I finished, she was quiet for a second, and then she said, "What was the man doing?" "In the yard." Ruth said he was doing something. "Leaning," I said. She said he was leaning at the tree line, not moving right. Something happened in Marisol's face. Just for a second, a flat kind of dropping, the way a house looks when the power goes out. Then she pulled it back and she said, "The prank caller thing. That's a good theory. You should probably go with that." And she turned to her console, and started her shift. It took me until about 4 in the morning to understand 3 things. That she'd just told me to stop, in the exact tone Denny used. That she'd flinched at leaning, and that I had never once said the word leaning to her. I'd told her a man was in the yard. I'd told her the address and the fire, but I had not told her he was leaning. She knew that detail before I gave it to her. Around 5, when the shift was almost dead and Denny was on his lunch, I asked her, quietly, not looking at her, the way you ask things at 5 in the morning. You've heard him leaning too, haven't you? Marisol didn't answer for a long time. Then she said, I took a call. Must be 12 years ago now. Kid, maybe 19. Said there was a man standing at the end of his driveway who wouldn't leave. Said he was leaning. Said it in this real particular way, like the man was hung on something. She was very still. Denny took the radio out of my hand. Physically took it. Sent the deputy but told me to hang up the phone. I said we don't hang up on people. He said we do on this one. She finally looked at me. The kid was fine. I want you to know that. He was fine. The deputy went. There was nobody there. The kid went back to bed. Denny wasn't protecting the kid. She turned back to her screen. He was protecting me from staying on the line with it. And I have never asked him why, and you should stop asking me, because I don't want to know, and I've spent 12 years not knowing, and it's the only reason I can still do this job. That was the most Marisol ever said to me about it. She never said another word the whole rest of the time I knew her. But she told me the important thing, which was that it wasn't Denny's private superstition. 2 people, 12 years apart, on different lines, had heard a man in a yard, leaning, not moving right. And the older one had spent over a decade deliberately not looking at it, and she was telling me, in the only way she could, to do the same. I want to lay out what I actually knew at that point, because it was still nothing you could take to Paula, and I did keep trying to argue with it. I knew a woman named Ruth had called about a prowler and described a house that burned down in 1994 with her in it. I knew the deputy found only a foundation and heard a screen door in the trees. I knew the exact same call, same address, same man in the yard, was logged in 1994 in a dead dispatcher's handwriting, 40 minutes before the fire that killed the caller. I knew the audio file said it was captured on line 7, which wasn't supposed to record 911. I knew Denny said it moves. I knew Marisol had heard the leaning man 12 years ago and had been not hearing him ever since. Any one of those, fine. All of them together were a shape, and the shape had a screen door and a yard and a man who leaned, and it had been standing there for 30 years, and it was starting to walk in through lines it wasn't supposed to use. I'm a stubborn man, and my version of being scared is to go looking. So I decided to pull every call that had ever come in on line 7. If it was a glitchy dead line that occasionally rang and occasionally captured things, there'd be a record. Systems log everything. I had access. I did it on my own time, clocked out, sitting at a console during the empty pre-dawn hours when Denny was on his lunch and Marisol was off that night. The search came back with more than I expected, and it took me most of a week of dead time nights to work through it, because I made myself work through it properly, instead of just looking for the scary ones. Line 7 had activity, going back as far as our current system's records went, which was 2008, when the county migrated to the CAD we use now. And most of it, I want to be honest about this, because the junk is what made me believe the rest. Most of it was nothing. Hundreds of 1-second connections, no audio, the kind of thing a corroded copper pair does when the wind moves it or a squirrel chews a junction box, ghost rings. There were whole years where line 7 was just noise, and every time I hit a long stretch of noise I felt this relief, like maybe the call box theory was going to hold after all. But scattered through the junk were the real ones. Not many, maybe 2 or 3 a year, some years none. Each one a short audio file, each one flagged by the system as line 7, and here's the first pattern that got its hooks in me. Every single one of them, all of them, over 16 years, was time-stamped between 3 o'clock and 3:30 a.m. Not one outside that window. The junk connections happened all hours. That's what a corroded line does. It doesn't care what time it is. But the ones with a voice on them only ever happened in that half hour. A dead copper line doesn't know what time it is. Something else did. I opened one. I picked one from a couple years back, at random, and I put my headset on, and I hit play. At first, silence. Not deadline silence, room silence. The sound of a space with air in it. A little bit of a hiss, like an open outdoor mic. Then, under it, a sound I spent a long time trying to name, and the closest I ever got was a screen door. That soft double sound, the light slap and the spring creak, the way an old screen door sounds when the wind moves it, but doesn't quite close it. Slap, creak, slap, creak. Wind through a screen door, out in the open, at night. Then a voice said a name. Not a name I knew. It said it once, quietly, patiently, the way you'd say a name into a dark house to see if anybody was home, and then the file ended. That was the second pattern, and it took me 3 more nights and a lot of files to be sure of it. Every real recording had the screen door. Every single one. The same slap and creak, the same rhythm, like it was the same door in every recording, over years, in a county with maybe 6,000 doors. And in most of them, a voice said a name into the dark. Different names. Always one name, always once, always patient, always with that same terrible politeness, like a man standing on a porch he'd stood on 100 times, calling in someone who was late for dinner. The third pattern was the one that turned my stomach, and it only showed up because I made myself be a professional about it and cross-reference. I took the names off the recordings, the ones I could make out, and I ran them against county death records for the weeks after each recording. Not all of them matched. Some names I never found, but enough matched. Margaret, a Thomas, a woman named Eloise, each name spoken quietly into the dark on line 7, at 3 in the morning, days or weeks before somebody with that name in Halworth County died. Car wrecks, mostly, a drowning, a fire. The ordinary rural ways people die out here, spread across 16 years so that no one would ever connect them, because who connects a drowning in 2011 to a car wreck in 2016? Nobody, unless they're sitting alone in a cold basement at 4 in the morning with a headset on, listening to a dead line say the names in advance. And the fourth thing, the most recent real recording before Handel Road, captured about 5 months earlier, in the spring. I saved it for last because by then I knew what I was going to hear, and I didn't want to hear it. The wind, the screen door, slap and creak, and the voice, polite and patient, saying, Danny. Daniel Kessler, Danny. 5 months before Ruth called me about a man in her yard saying her husband's name, this line had already recorded someone standing at a screen door, in the wind, saying Danny into the dark. But the Kesslers died in 1994. Danny had been dead 30 years when the line said his name. So either the pattern was breaking, the names weren't always people about to die, or the pattern had never been what I thought it was, and the line wasn't predicting deaths at all. It was doing something else, something I didn't have a word for, calling people in, saying their names into the dark to see if they'd answer. And here's where I made my mistake, and I need you to understand exactly how ordinary it was, because that's the whole horror of it. I was sitting there with the Danny recording, 4 in the morning, headset on, more tired than I've ever been, listening to that patient voice say a dead man's name into the wind. And when it said Danny, I answered it, out loud, into my own dead microphone, half to myself, the way you'd answer any voice that comes out of the dark asking if somebody's there. I said, yeah, I hear you. That's all. 3 words. It's the most natural thing in the world for a person who does what I do. Somebody speaks out of the dark, and every reflex you've built over 6 years, every hour of training that lives below your thinking, says the same thing back. I hear you. I'm here. Tell me where you are. I didn't even notice I'd done it. Nobody had ever told me not to, because it never occurs to anybody that you might need to be told not to answer a recording. I don't remember driving home that morning. I remember I did, because I woke up in my own bed at noon, with the taste of gas station coffee in my mouth, and no memory of the drive, and that scared me more than the recordings had, because losing time is a thing that happens to me maybe once a decade, and it means I'm further past my limit than I'll admit. There was one more thing before Vera, and I have to tell it, because it's the night I stopped being a man investigating a problem and became a man in one. It was maybe a week later. Different caller, different part of the county, and it came in on line 2 again. Ordinary, an older man out on Vench Road east of Ammon. He was calm, almost apologetic. He said he didn't want to bother us, but there was a phone ringing. I asked him where. He said in the house across the road from him, the Kettler place, which had been empty 6 or 7 years since old Mr. Kettler passed. Nobody lived there. The power had been off for years, and there was a phone ringing in it, he said. An old kind of ring. He'd heard it start up around 3, and it wouldn't stop, and it was making his dog crazy, and he thought maybe somebody'd broken in. I sent Cole. It was Cole's night. And I stayed on with the old man, and I could hear it through his phone, faint, across a dark rural road. A phone ringing in an empty house that had no power and no phone. An old mechanical ring, the same buzz as line 7. I counted it, the way you count things when you're trying to stay sane. It rang in patterns of 11. 11 rings. Silence. 11 rings. Cole got there. I heard him key up, and his voice was different than the flat radio voice. It was careful. Calm. I'm at the Kettler place. There's no power here. Confirmed. Meters pulled, and I can hear a phone ringing inside. A pause. Advise. Do you want me to make entry? I told him yes, because what else do you say? There's a break-in in progress at an empty house. Of course you make entry. And Cole made entry, and I heard the door, and I heard his boots, and I heard the ringing get louder as he got closer to it, room by room. 11, and silence. 11, and silence. And then I heard it stop. Mid-ring. It didn't ring out. It stopped like someone had picked it up. And Cole didn't say anything for 11 seconds. I counted those too. Then he said, "Calm. There's no phone in this house. Careful. Level. A man holding himself very still. There's no phone. There's no jack. There's a table where a phone used to be. There's the dust square where it sat. But there's no phone, and there's no line, and I'm standing in the room where it was ringing, and it's not here, and it never was." Another pause. And Aaron. He almost never used my name on the radio. There's a screen door on the back of this house, and it's the only thing in here that's moving, and there's no wind tonight. He cleared it unfounded. Of course he did. There's no other box. But when he came in to do paperwork, he didn't ask me anything this time. He just stood at the end of my console for a while, and then he said, "Whatever you're doing, and I know you're doing something, Keel, you've had that records room look for weeks. I want you to leave me out of it. I've got 2 kids. I don't get to go where you're going." And he was right, and he was decent about it, and I never asked him to respond to another one of those, and he never told anybody. That was Cole. He drew a line, and he stood on his side of it, and I don't blame him. I wish I'd had a line to stand on. But I understood something from the Kettler place that I hadn't understood before. Ruth's call, the 94 log, the leaning man. Those could all, if you squinted, be about the past. Echoes. Something replaying. But a phone ringing in an empty house with no power, in patterns of 11, at 3 in the morning, until a deputy walks up to it and it picks up. That wasn't the past. That was the thing looking for a phone. Any phone. It didn't need line 7. Line 7 was just the one it had used the longest. It was ringing in empty houses now. It was walking in on line 2. Denny was right. It had gotten loose. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a cold little clerk was already noting that it had gotten loose. Right around the time I'd started answering it. I needed someone who'd been there before 2008, before our records started. And there was exactly one person I could think of. Denny had trained everybody, but somebody had trained Denny. Her name was Vera Soul. She'd run the comm center back when it was just 2 phones and a paper log, retired somewhere around 2006, and Denny still mentioned her the way you mention a teacher you were scared of. I found her the boring way. She was in the phone book, an actual phone book, out in Ammon. 81 years old, and she answered on the second ring, in a voice like a rake dragged over gravel. I told her who I was, where I worked. She was quiet, and then she said, "You're calling about it, or you're calling about the fella who told you not to call about it." I said both, I guessed. Come out here, she said. I don't talk about this on a phone. Never have. You'll understand why when you think about it. I understood why the second she said it. Of course you don't talk about the phone line on a phone. Vera lived in a small brick house behind the Methodist church, with the shades half down, and a police scanner on the kitchen counter, still on, still turned low, 20 years after she'd retired. She made me coffee I didn't want, and she sat across from me, and she looked at me for a long time before she said anything, the way you'd look at a man who's got a diagnosis he doesn't know about yet. I started to lay it all out for her, the whole case, the 94 log, the recordings, the Kettler house. She let me get about 2 sentences in, and then she held up one hand, not unkind. You're doing it right now, she said. You're telling it to me like a caller, like if you give me all the details in the right order, I'll tell you what it is and what to send. That's the job. I did the job 40 years. I know exactly what you're doing. She lowered her hand. Stop it. It's not a caller. That's the first thing, and it's the only thing that matters, and you already half know it, or you wouldn't be at my table. Say it back to me. Say it's not a caller. I said it. It felt stupid, and it felt true at the same time. It's not a caller. Good. She sat back. Now I'll tell you what I know, which is less than you want, and more than I've ever told anybody. And then you're going to go home, and you're going to be a coward about this, because the brave ones don't last. She told me about the first time. 1971, she said, before the county even had 911, when the number was just a phone on her desk and one at the sheriff's house. A ring in the middle of the night, nobody there, just outside. Wind, a screen door somewhere going in the wind, and then a man's voice, real polite, saying a name. Margaret. Just once. And she knew a Margaret. Everybody did. Margaret fell. And 2 days later, Margaret fell, went off the road on the reservoir curve, and drowned in her car. And Vera told herself it was coincidence, because you're 28, and you've got a job to do. But you want to know what I did the next time it rang, she said. I answered it, because I'm stubborn, the way you're stubborn. I can see it on you. It's the same disease. The line rang, and the voice said, Thomas. And I, God forgive me, I said, Thomas who? She shook her head slowly. I answered it. And that's the thing you can't take back. And it's the thing Denny couldn't tell you, because there's no telling it. The only way to learn it is to do it. And once you've done it, you can't warn anybody. Because how do you say to a new kid, don't answer the phone? It's a phone. Answering it is the whole reason you're there. I asked her what happens when you answer. She didn't answer that directly. She never answered anything directly, and I came to understand that wasn't evasion, it was accuracy. She genuinely didn't know the mechanism. 40 years, and she'd never seen the machine, only the door of it. It doesn't want to talk to you, she said. Get that idea out of your head. It's not trying to have a conversation. When it says those names, it isn't asking a question. And it isn't warning you either. Those aren't people it's worried about. She turned her coffee cup a quarter turn on the table, a small, precise motion. Before you answer, it doesn't know where you are. It's out there in the dark somewhere, and it's calling names into houses, trying doors, seeing who's home. That's all the ringing is. It's knocking. And when you pick up, when you say anything back, one word, doesn't matter what, you've told it there's somebody home here. You've told it which door is yours. And then nothing. For a long time, usually. She looked at me steady. That's the cruel part. It's not a thing that comes for you that night with teeth. It's slower, and it's smaller, and it's worse than that. It just knows you now. And every so often, at 3, it comes and stands at your door and says the names of the others it's found, the ones who answered before you. And you sit there and you hear them, and you learn to sit on your hands. For years, maybe. Decades. I did. Her voice dropped, and it was the only time it dropped the whole conversation. Until one night it gets to your name, and when it does, there's a new kid on the line, some baby dispatcher who doesn't know yet, and they hear your voice come out of the dark, saying somebody else's name, wind and a screen door behind you. and they do the natural thing. They answer, and it's got them. And it's done with you. I sat with that a while. The names weren't victims. The names were the previous answerers. Margaret, Thomas, Eloise, Danny. Every name on those recordings was a person who, some night, had said hello. Then Vera looked at me differently, and I knew she'd caught up to the thing I hadn't told her yet. Your Handle Road call came in on line 2, she said slowly. Not 7. Yeah. In 40 years it never once came in on anything but 7. It stayed put. That was the mercy of it. We knew where it lived. She was very still now. It came to you on 2. It rang an empty house for your deputy. It's off the leash, and it doesn't come off the leash for no reason. It comes off the leash when it's got a scent. She set her cup down. You've done something. What have you done? You said you never answered 7. I never picked up 7. Denny stopped me. That's not what I asked. She leaned forward, and her old hand came down flat on the table, and she said it very quietly. Did you answer it? In any form? Did you ever, one single time, say a word back to that thing? And I remembered. 4 in the morning, headset on, the recording playing, the voice saying Danny, into the dark. And me, tired, half to myself, into a dead microphone that couldn't send anything anywhere. Yeah, I hear you, I told her. Vera closed her eyes. She didn't yell at me, and somehow that was worse. She just sat there with her eyes closed for a long moment, and then she said, "It doesn't need a live line." It never did. The line was just where you'd be listening. You put its voice in your ears in a dark room and you answered it, and it doesn't care whether the sound was recorded in a studio or spoke fresh from hell. It only cares that you answered. You told it there's somebody home. She opened her eyes. You did to yourself in 1 week what Denny spent 30 years trying to keep off you kids. I asked her the only thing left to ask. What do I do? Be nobody to it, she said. That's the whole of it, and it's almost impossible. Don't pick up 7. Don't play the recordings. Don't say its names out loud. Don't say a word back to it, ever again, no matter what it says, or whose voice it says it in, because it will use a voice you can't refuse. That's the last thing it learns to do. You've got to sit in that room every night and be as dead to it as a table. She walked me to the door. On the step, she gripped my arm, a hand like a bundle of sticks, and she said the thing I think about every single night now. Denny's kept it off you people for 25 years by being the one it comes to. He made himself the door so the young ones wouldn't have to be. You go back there, and you watch him at 3, and you pray it doesn't figure out there's a fresher door in the room. I went back to work 2 nights later. There was nothing to do with what Vera had told me. I couldn't file a report that said the county's dispatch center is haunted by a screen door. I couldn't quit, because Vera had made it clear quitting doesn't help. It's got your voice, not your building, and it goes where you go. So I did the only thing left, which was watch Denny at 3 and try to be a table. Before any of the rest of it happened, Denny and I had one good ordinary night, and I'm glad we did, because it's the one I keep when I don't want to keep the others. Slow shift, nobody dying, and Denny got to talking about the old days the way he did when the room was empty. He told me about a dispatcher from before my time, a guy named Petey, who'd once toned out the fire department for a chimney fire and given them the address of the Dairy Queen, and how 8 volunteers in turnout gear had shown up ready to save a soft-serve machine. He did the whole thing, the voices, Petey's excuses. He laughed so hard he had to take his glasses off. He showed me the photo of the boat taped to his monitor, a little aluminum fishing boat, and told me he'd been going to buy it for 11 years, and the price kept going up faster than he could save, and at this point, it was a matter of principle, him against the boat. He said when he retired he was going to sit in that boat on Pima tuning and not answer a single phone for the rest of his life. I told him he'd be bored inside a week. He said, "Aaron, I have wanted to be bored for 30 years. You have no idea." We drank bad coffee and it was 2 in the morning, and it was, I realize now, the last completely good hour I had with him. The first few nights of watching him, nothing. Slow, ordinary. Denny ate his sandwich and complained about the stapler. At 3 o'clock I watched him without trying to look like I was watching him. And he watched line 7 without trying to look like he was watching it. And I understood that we both knew, and that this was the whole arrangement, and that it had probably been the arrangement for Marisol too, for years. A room full of people all pretending not to hear the same thing. But I'd started to notice things about Denny that I hadn't let myself notice before. He was grayer. He moved slower every week. The sandwich got smaller. He'd been calling off more. And when he was in, he'd sometimes press his hand flat to his chest in the middle of a slow stretch. Not like it hurt exactly. More like he was checking something was still there. And one night, around 3:20, after 7 had rung and we'd both let it ring out, he said, not looking at me, "You get to a point where you're more tired of being the one it calls than you are afraid of what happens when it stops calling you." He said it lightly, the way he said everything. I told him not to talk like that. He said, "I'm not talking like anything. I'm the senior man. I'm telling you the schedule." And he wouldn't say another word about it. The second week, it rang, 3:09, that mechanical buzz, and Denny was up, but slower this time, a beat slower than the first night, and he put his hand over the cradle like always, and he looked at me like always, and he said, "Not that one," and I nodded, and we waited it out, 11 rings and quiet. And when it was over, Denny sat back down, and he was breathing hard, harder than the walk warranted, and he had his hand pressed flat on his chest, and he said, "I'm getting old for this, Aaron," and he laughed, and it wasn't a real laugh. He didn't come in the next night, or the one after. Paula sent an email that Denny was in the hospital in Ammon, cardiac, that he was stable, that they'd get coverage. Marisol and I worked the floor alone, and neither of us said what we were both doing, which was watching line 7 in shifts. Two people who'd never once talked about it out loud, doing it together in total silence. And I noticed, we both noticed, I could tell, that with Denny gone, line 7 rang more. It rang almost every night. It rang like it was checking rooms. It rang like it had noticed the usual door wasn't answering, and was looking for another one. I went to see Denny on a Sunday. He looked small in the bed, glasses off, and he was glad to see me in a way that embarrassed both of us. We talked about nothing for a while. The Browns, the food, the nurse he liked, and the one he didn't. I told him line 7 was ringing more. He nodded, like a doctor hearing about a symptom he'd expected. Then, because I couldn't not, I asked him, "Vera says you made yourself the door, so it come to you, and not the rest of us." Denny closed his eyes. "Vera talks too much. Is it true?" "It's not that noble," he said. I answered it once. 30 years ago, new on the job, 3 in the morning, and it said a name, and I did the natural thing, same as you, same as everybody. So it already had me. And once it's got you, Aaron, you might as well stand at the front of the line, because at least then you know when it's coming, and the kids in the room behind you don't have to. He opened his eyes, and something in his face shifted, some calculation running behind it. "You want to know the thing I figured out, that I don't think even Vera knows. In 30 years, it never once said my name. It says the others. Margaret, Thomas, the Kessler man, all of them. Never me. And I couldn't figure why, for the longest time, and then one night I got it. Why? Because the door doesn't say its own name," Denny said. "It reaches through the door for the next one. As long as I was the door it came to, I was safe. Because a door doesn't call itself in, it calls the next house." He was quiet a moment, and then he said the thing, lightly, the way he said everything, tapping the monitor leads taped to his chest with one thick finger. "But there's only one way to stop being the door, kid, and it isn't retirement. The door only closes when the man behind it does. I want to be honest about something, because Vera was honest with me. I don't know if Denny had it all right. He was a dispatcher, not a priest. He'd spent 30 years building a theory out of a thing he was never allowed to look at directly. Same as Vera, same as me. Maybe the door was real. Maybe it was a story he told himself, so that 30 years of sitting in a cold room being hunted would mean something, would be a job he was doing for us, instead of a thing that was being done to him. I've thought about it 1,000 ways. I don't know. What I know is that he believed it, and that he was at peace in that hospital bed in a way I'd never seen him. and that he told me the schedule and then he kept to it. Denny died the following Thursday. Heart. It was on the death certificate in Plain County handwriting. Cardiac arrest. 61 years old. There was a service at the Methodist church, and half the sheriff's office came, and Cole came in his good uniform, and shook my hand, and didn't say anything about any of it. Vera came, in a black coat, standing at the back, like she didn't feel entitled to a pew. She found me afterward on the church steps, and gripped my arm with that bundle of sticks hand, and she said one thing to me. It's looking for a new door now. It'll go through the rooms saying the old door's name, to see if anybody's home behind it. If you hear his name on that line, you do not answer. Do you understand me? You do not answer, no matter what your whole body is screaming at you to do. Then she let go and walked to her car, and I never saw her again, though I hear she's still out there, still has the scanner on. And the thing I'd noticed at the hospital was true. After Denny, line 7 went quiet a while. Not more, the way it had when he was just sick, quiet, empty. And that emptiness was the worst thing yet, worse than any ring, because a ringing phone is at least a thing looking somewhere else. A quiet one is a thing that's found what it was looking for, and is taking its time. I've been the senior man on nights for 4 months now. I train the new ones. There's a kid named Wyatt, 23, sharp, too eager, reminds me of nobody so much as myself at that age. His first week I trained him on the CAD and the radio and the county roads, and at the end of it, over bad coffee at 2 in the morning, I told him the thing, exactly like it was told to me, no wink and no smile. If 7 rings after 3, you don't pick it up. He laughed. Of course he laughed. I laughed once too. I let him laugh, because I've learned what Denny knew. You have to let them laugh. The ones who don't laugh are the ones who get curious, and curiosity is the road I walked, and I know where it goes. So I let Wyatt think line 7 is the county's little joke, the left-handed screwdriver, and I hope to God he keeps thinking it, because the day he stops laughing is the day he starts listening, and I don't want to watch a 4th. I finally understand that sentence. Denny wasn't being dramatic. He'd literally watched 3 people do it, and he'd carried each of them, and he did not want to carry a 4th, and now I'm the one doing the not wanting. That's the part nobody tells you. It isn't just a curse on a phone line. It's a job that gets handed down, one dispatcher to the next, in a warning that sounds like a joke. Vera trained Denny, and Denny trained me, and I'm training Wyatt, and somewhere in that chain, the real thing being passed along isn't how to work the radio. It's how to sit in a cold room at 3 in the morning and not answer a voice in the dark, which is the one thing a dispatcher is built not to be able to do. I watch line 7 every night at 3. Most nights, nothing. Some nights it rings, and I sit on my hands and I let it ring 11 times and stop, and Wyatt across the room pretends he doesn't hear it, and I pretend I don't see him pretending. And we are, the 2 of us, exactly the room I walked into a year ago. It's a strange kind of peace, once you accept it. You just don't answer. That's the whole job under the job. You just, every night, don't answer. 3 nights ago it rang at 3:04. I let it ring, 11 times. And on the 9th ring, under the buzz quiet, the way you'd only hear if you'd spent a year training your ears for exactly this, I heard it. The screen door, slap, creak, the wind, and a voice, polite and patient, the way it always was, said a name into the dark. It said Denny, and every cell in my body, 6 years of training, 36 years of being a person, the deepest reflex there is, the one that lives underneath thinking. Every part of me wanted to pick it up and say, I'm here, I hear you, tell me where you are. Because that was Denny, that was his voice. My friend, who bought me coffee and never bought his boat, who took Earl's calls just so somebody would answer, and he sounded so far away and so alone out there, at the edge of the tree line in the wind, and there is nothing in me built to leave a voice like that unanswered. I had my hand halfway across the desk. I had my fingers on the cradle. I actually had my hand on the phone. And I heard Vera on the church steps, and I heard Denny in the hospital bed saying a door doesn't say its own name, and I understood, all at once, standing there with my hand on a ringing phone, what it meant that the line was saying Denny's name. Because if the names are the ones who answered, the doors it's already found and finished with, then it wasn't Denny out there in the dark, calling in. Denny doesn't get to be out there. Denny was the door, and the door was open now, standing wide, because the man behind it had closed his eyes for good in a hospital bed in Ammon. And the thing was standing at the threshold of that open door, in the wind, saying the name of the door out loud, the way you'd knock and call hello into a house you weren't sure was empty. It was checking whether anybody new was home behind Denny's door, and I almost answered. That's what I can't get past. I almost said hello. I took my hand off the phone. It rang 2 more times and stopped, and the room was very quiet, and Wyatt was very carefully not looking at me, and I sat there and shook for a while, quietly, so the kid wouldn't see. I thought that was the end of it. I really did. I thought I understood the shape of the whole thing now. Vera, Denny, me, the door, the schedule, all of it. And that the job from here on was just endurance. Sit in the cold room, don't answer, be a table, hand the warning to Wyatt someday, and hope he laughs long enough. I made my peace with that. It's not much of a peace, but it's the one on offer. Then last week I did one last thing, and I wish I hadn't, and I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to stop. I went back into the archive. Not to listen. I'd learned that much. I just wanted to be a professional about it one final time, to have the whole record straight in my head, because that's the only way I know how to hold anything. I wanted to find the very first recording, the oldest one in our system, from 2008, the year the county migrated. I figured the oldest one would be the most degraded, and I told myself I only wanted to check the metadata, the timestamp, the length. I told myself I wouldn't play it. I played it. Better headphones this time, because part of me had to be sure of something I couldn't name yet. The hiss, the open-air silence, the screen door. Slap, creak, the wind moving through it, patient, the same door it's always been. And then the voice, polite and patient, saying one name into the dark. In every other recording, going back 16 years, the name is somebody who answered before. Margaret, who Vera talked to in 1971. Thomas, Eloise, the Kessler man, Danny. 4 or 5 others I could put names to from the old logs. Every one of them a person who, some night, at 3 in the morning, made the mistake of saying hello. But this recording is from 2008. It's the oldest one. There was nobody before it. It's the first name the system ever caught, and the name it says is Aaron. I've checked everything. There was no Aaron working dispatch in this county in 2008. There was no Aaron in the old logs, no Aaron in the property records, no Aaron in the obituaries for the whole decade around it. I didn't move here until 6 years ago. I didn't set foot in Helworth County until 2018. In 2008, I was downstate, married, taking car accident calls outside Columbus, and I had never heard of Handel Road, or the Kesslers, or Line 7, or any of it. So the name on the oldest recording, the first one, the one that comes before every person who ever answered, it can't be someone who answered before me. There was no before me. Which means it isn't the name of a door it's already found. It's the name of the door it was going to find. It wasn't predicting me. You don't practice a name you're going to need in the future by saying it into the dark for 16 years. You practice a name you already know. It had my name before I had a reason to be here. It said it into the wind, patient, night after night, year after year, in that basement, into a dead line, the way you'd say a name over and over to get it exactly right, so that when the day finally came and it needed to, it could say it in a voice I couldn't refuse. It wasn't waiting to learn my voice. It was practicing mine. That concludes tonight's file. If you've ever experienced something strange or unexplained, I'd love to hear your story. You can share it in the comments, or send it to the email in the description. It might become a future case on Midnight Files. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, subscribe and join me for more documentary-style horror stories. Until next time, stay curious And remember, sometimes the things we can't explain are the ones we never forget.